Anchor Text. Not Just for Books, by Gil Garrison. Patrick looked at his watch. How is it time to go already? His father would be in front of the library to pick him up any minute. He had been totally absorbed in his research on big cats for a science essay. The eating habits of lions, the speed of cheetahs, the homes of snow leopards. Patrick had scanned through hundreds of facts and book after book at the library. Not many people would put the library at the top of their list of places to go on a sunny weekend afternoon. But apart from summertime hikes in the canyon near his grandfather's home, the library was Patrick's favorite spot. He read his first book here, a rhyming story about 3 fish. He could still remember sitting on a small wooden chair and tapping his feet as each word gradually began to make sense. Since then, he had read more books than he could remember. Even if Patrick didn't need to check out a book, there was something calming and quiet about the library. He often brought his homework after school and sat at his favorite table in the back corner. It was beneath a skylight. Splashes of late afternoon sunlight filtered onto Patrick as he worked out a math problem or studied grammar. The library was more than a place just to read or study or sit in quiet. Sometimes well-known artists or authors visited to discuss one of their books. There were even classes on the weekends, in the evenings, and during the summer. Patrick learned to paint in one class. In fact, there had been a gallery show in the lobby for 3 whole months, where Patrick and his other friends had their paintings hanging for everyone to see. His mother took a class too, where she learned to make clay pottery in the library studio. One time, Patrick came with his father to hear a neighborhood debate about whether or not a park should be turned into a parking lot. The library was a very important part of the community. During all of this, Mr. Cho had been the librarian. Mr. Cho could find any book you needed faster than a flash of lightning because he knew the library backward, forward, sideways, and upside down. Mr. Cho sometimes set aside books he knew Patrick and his friends would enjoy. Just last week, Mr. Cho lent Patrick a fictional story about 3 friends who find a treasure at the bottom of the ocean. The chapter with circling sharks still gave Patrick the chills. Patrick looked at his watch again and gathered his books and papers. As he walked toward the exit, he looked for Mr. Cho to say goodbye. Mr. Cho wasn't in his usual spot at the desk, but instead was in a hallway on the telephone. His always cheerful face looked shaken as he nodded and said, "I understand. Yes, 3 to 4 months, I understand." Not wanting to interrupt the conversation, Patrick walked quietly to the door and out into the cool evening. He was looking around the parking lot for his father's car when something caught his eye. His best friend Walt was waving to him from farther down the sidewalk. "Did you hear?" asked Walt as he walked toward Patrick. "About extra credit?" said Patrick. "Yeah, I heard. Add 300 words to our science essays and we get a bonus in our final score. So you better get to work." "No, not that," said Walt, rolling his eyes. "It's the library." "What about the library?" asked Patrick. "It's closing," Walt told him. Patrick looked at his watch and said, "Not for another 2 hours." "Not tonight," replied Walt. "I mean forever. It's closing down for good. My brother told me before I came here, something about not enough money for it." "That's ridiculous," exclaimed Patrick. He was shocked and sad and frustrated all at once. He wanted to let out a furious roar like the big cats he had been researching. "Sorry, Pat," said his friend. "I know you love this place. I guess some people think it's just a bunch of books that you can find anywhere." Walt walked off as Patrick stood there stunned. The library was closing? It couldn't be true. Where would he go to read, study, and everything else that he loved doing at the library? No more art classes? No more town debates? No more library lobby decorated with original art? No more favorite table under a skylight on sunny days? Gone. A loud honking shook Patrick back into reality. "Hey, sport," called his father from the car. "You okay? You look a little upset." Patrick climbed into the car and nodded. "Yes, a little. No, a lot. I just found out the library is closing." "I heard about it too," said his father, "and I'm really sorry. I know how much you like this place. We haven't been able to peel you away from it ever since that fish book." Patrick's father smiled and squeezed his shoulder. But that's how it goes sometimes. There's only so much money to go around in a community." Patrick nodded, and they drove off. How could there not be a library? There had to be a way to save it. But who would listen to him? And obviously the decision had already been made. The next morning, Patrick woke up still thinking about the library. The last time something had been on his mind so much was when the sequel to his favorite book came out. Walt and Patrick waited in line for hours to buy it, and this was much worse than just waiting in a line with dozens of other people. One of Patrick's favorite places was going to be gone soon. The place of all those memories just taken away. He slowly pulled himself out of bed. He couldn't even get excited for his usual weekend morning bike ride with Walt. As he got ready for what was usually an exciting way to start the day, Patrick was sad at the thought of never seeing poor Mr. Cho and the rows of books again. That must have been why Mr. Cho was on the phone yesterday. Hearing the bad news must have been terrible for him, too. It was as if he and the library were one. A knock on the door announced Walt's arrival, and Patrick ran to answer, still preoccupied with the library. "What's up, buddy?" "Hey, you look miserable," noticed Walt. "Are you sick, Pat?" "No," said Patrick, "just upset. You know." "Oh, right, the library. It's not just a bunch of books. It's more than that," said Patrick. "I know it is," said Walt. "I know how much you like that place." "I do," sighed Patrick. "Maybe not as much as Grandpa's canyon hikes, but still." "Well, what would you do if someone decided to close down the canyon?" asked Walt. "That's silly," replied Patrick. "That wouldn't happen." "But what if it did?" asked Walt. He looked Patrick square in the eye. "Would you just be sad and mope and wish it wasn't going to happen? Or would you stand up and do something about it?" "Well, I'd probably do something or say something," said Patrick. "You can't just close down a canyon." Where was Walt going with this? "Then why don't you do something about the library?" responded Walt. "Like what?" said Patrick. "I can't just stand up and say, 'Don't close this place down,' can I?" "Maybe it's that simple," Walt told him with a shrug of his shoulders. "Maybe you just need to get other people involved who love the library as much as you do. Maybe you can all figure out how to save it." "I'm just a kid, though," insisted Patrick. "I can't just lead the town." "There's nothing written in stone that says you can't," said Walt. "Look, I have an idea. Follow me." They hopped on their bikes and pedaled off. Minutes later, they were at the library front desk talking to Mr. Cho. "Good morning, Mr. Cho," said Walt. "Hello, boys," replied Mr. Cho, still looking sadder than usual. "Pat has something to tell you," said Walt. "I do?" replied Patrick. "Yeah," Walt told him, "about the library, about it closing, and, well, go ahead, Pat." Walt gently pushed Patrick forward. "So you two have heard?" inquired Mr. Cho. Patrick hesitated before saying anything and stood quietly for a few seconds. "Yes, sir, we have. It's just awful. Why is it closing after all this time?" "There were some big budget cuts. Unfortunately, there's not enough money to keep the library open beyond a few months." "It's only because of money that the library is closing?" asked Patrick. "Sadly, yes," said Mr. Cho. "If only we could find the money to keep the library open, then we wouldn't have to give up this wonderful space. This isn't for you to worry about, though. You boys go and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Don't let your day be ruined by budget concerns." It didn't seem fair that money was the reason Patrick's favorite local space would close down forever. But where could they get the money to save it in 3 months? The only time he'd raised any money was when his painting from the foyer was auctioned off for a local charity, and that was only $50. Then it struck Patrick. If there were an auction to sell more artwork, then maybe, just maybe, he could raise enough money to save the library, at least for a little while. He still had 3 paintings from the class he had taken that might sell. He wasn't the only one who had artwork from the class either. He knew Walt and several of his other friends did too. They could all put their work up for auction. The more he thought about it, the more possible it seemed. Not only could the work of his friends help raise money, but the pottery of his mother and her friends, and anyone else who had taken a class at the library could too. Earlier today, any thought of saving the library had seemed impossible. Now, Patrick's hopes were inflated, growing more and more as he thought about the auction. Surely there were other people who would want to help as much as he did. He looked at Walt and said, "I have an idea. We're going to need to make a lot of flyers and get everyone in town involved. We don't have much time, so we have to act fast." "What's your idea?" asked Walt. Patrick walked toward the front door to leave. He looked over his shoulder back at Walt, who looked surprised at Patrick's newfound energy. Waving over his shoulder, Patrick beckoned Walt to follow him. "Come on, I'll explain on the way." Back at home, Patrick ran to his father and explained his idea. Patrick's father smiled. "You sound very determined, Patrick. What can I do to help?" "Call Mr. Cho at the library," said Patrick. "Ask him if it is okay to have the auction there next weekend. Walt and I will do the rest." Once the boys knew that Mr. Cho had given his approval for the auction, they set to work. Patrick designed the flyer for the auction. With Walt's help, he wrote a letter to the town board in charge of the budget. The letter explained what they were doing to help save the library and invited the board members to the auction as well. Once the flyer was created, the boys made copies and posted them throughout the neighborhood to encourage everyone to take part in saving the special community space. Patrick even emailed the flyer to other nearby libraries to spread the word. The more people who know about the auction, the better, thought Patrick, as he posted a flyer in the entrance of a cafe. One by one, phone calls and emails trickled in during the week from people with art to donate. A photograph here, 3 paintings there, another piece of pottery over here. The week was busy, but Patrick was so intent on saving the library that he never stopped. In fact, he felt energized. When the day of the auction arrived, Patrick was exhausted but excited. All in all, people had donated more than 200 drawings, 100 paintings, 60 photographs, and even some sculptures. Almost everyone in the neighborhood was gathered in the basement of the library, where all of the work was on display. Even though he was thrilled by all of the support, Patrick was still nervous. What if they didn't raise enough money? Worse yet, what if nothing sold? Moments before the auction, Patrick's father came over to him. "Are you okay?" he asked his son. "Yeah, I'm okay," replied Patrick. "You look awfully worried. Are you sure you're okay?" his father prodded. "I'm just nervous. Nervous we won't raise enough." "Patrick, you've brought the community together," his father said. "Your determination to save this place has united us all. I'm proud no matter what happens. It looks like the auction is about to start. Let's see just how much money a mere boy can raise." An hour later, every last piece was sold. One of the town board members bought all the sculptures for his garden. The auction raised enough money to keep the library open for 6 months. More importantly, the board members were impressed by the event and the community's support of the library. They agreed to examine the budget and to find a way to keep the library open for a long time. At the end of the day, all Patrick wanted to do was take the longest nap in the history of naps. Maybe he could relax in his special spot underneath the skylight. After all, his leadership had helped save that spot for him and for everyone in the community.